So it happened. So it came. The day we were all either fearing or theorising would come, hoping for, whatever it is we thought about, has come as we look at the Irish team sheet and we glance over the forwards and we go, yeah, as expected, mostly Leinster players. And we glance at the backs and we see exactly the thing we wanted. Is Hugo Keenan still in the team? No, Jack Crowley finally comes in and starts for Ireland after a Six Nations where he has been the talking point, despite not playing that much rugby and playing most of it out of his most familiar position.
Yeah, so just remember, everybody, as we watch this, no matter what happens in Saturday's game between Ireland v Italy, if Ireland win, it is for one reason. It is only solely because Jack Crowley's come in and he's finally steered the team to success.
Yep.
He's finally led the team in the way that Sam Prendergast should have done all Six Nations. He's finally turned them round. He's taken the ball to the line. He's tackled. He's kicked the ball well, or whatever it is they're saying that he should do. He's managed. He's got the respect of the people around him. If Ireland win against Italy, and God knows it's a difficult task, it's only because of Jack Crowley. They wouldn't have done it with Sam Prendergast playing 10.
Yeah, so there has been a lot of debate over this. I think the interesting thing is, right, okay, and we were having this conversation off air not too long ago, half an hour ago or so on, that Sam Prendergast, on balance, has been the best fly half in this year's Six Nations.
Yeah.
He has been fantastic. His defence obviously is a work on. Obviously that's not brilliant, but every other area of his game is as elite as you could hope for from an international 10 at the minute. You know, his passing, his game management, his decision-making with the ball, and then, you know, you go beyond that into his kicking, which has been the big standing point. That's been the real change in Ireland this year, has been since coming in, we have seen Simon Easterby implement a much more kicking game plan. I think this probably would happen under Andy Farrell anyway. I think this is just like an evolution of the team they wanted to go for anyway, of kicking the ball much more. And he has been the guy for that. Yeah. He's got this massive boot, his range of kicks, the way he loves, you know, a spiral bomb, and he loves all of those other, like a spiral punt, just anything that spirals, he is massively, massively into. And I think he's made a huge difference there, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think what's happened here is a case of, there's two ways I think you typically read this team sheet, right? One is either they've dropped Prendergast, they've gone, this isn't working, we're getting rid of him. I've heard plenty of people saying he clearly isn't up to international standard, but that's just blatantly not true. And I don't know what games people are watching if that's the conclusion they're coming to. People are going with their mind made up and they're not reflecting on.
People are saying it because they don't want him to be international class, because they want their guy to play instead.
There's a handful of issues with him that are almost entirely his defence. He got smashed by Mo Afana at the weekend, but like you look at that example, right? And Hugo Keenan's at scrum half. He picks the ball up. By that point, the Dominicans overran it, and then Calvin Nash is running in nothing line. He's got no choice there. It's an easy read for Mo Farner. Like, there's circumstance around all of these things, right? He could ride that tackle better. Fine.
Yes.
He could get to ground quicker. He doesn't have a particularly great physical presence. Fine, right? I think these things are tiny and irrelevant, and you could apply them to most fly halves. Like, you'd apply them to a lot of fly halves down the years who've been brilliant international players. People are nitpicking because they want to find holes in his performance when they're excellent, because people have made their mind up about it already. What I think's happening here isn't that he's been dropped, to get back to my original point. I don't think he's been dropped, and the other way to look at it is, they brought Crowley in to drop him, or they've gone, oh, it's only Italy, so we'll just play our second choice here, right? So, which is Jack Crowley. I don't think that's what's happened. The way I read this is they've gone, okay, what we've got to do here, the task here isn't just beat Italy, it's beat Italy by around 70 points so that they can take that margin out and potentially win the Six Nations on points difference over France, right? And that is a huge task. They know what's in store, they know the levels they've got to go to, and that isn't just winning a game normally, that isn't the game management that Prendergast has brought to the team right throughout the tournament. What they need is someone who comes in and is particularly like an attacking threat, will engage the line themselves and provide something very, very different. So they've gone the best 10 for this particular set of circumstances, which isn't just winning a game, it's absolutely smashing a game wide open and winning by an enormous record-breaking margin.
Yeah, it's a very experienced player they've gone for in Jack Crowley. And despite my snark earlier, I don't think this is the incorrect decision to go for. Yeah. I like that they've done this.
I think both are true. That Prendergast has been the best 10 in this year's Six Nations, and it's correct to be starting Jack Crowley for this particular game, with this particular set of circumstances.
Because Jack Crowley's a great player.
He's a great player.
And obviously,
and a different player to Prendergast.
The thing about this narrative as well is it's inadvertently piled so much pressure on Jack Crowley to be perfect, or else he will be scrutinised in the same way by Leinster fans
Yeah.
or just people who disagree with the Munster fans who have kind of piled all of this onto Prendergast and expected him to be the perfect outside half at the age of 21, 7 caps into his international career, right? Which isn't the case. He's brilliant. Yeah, we were discussing before we came on air, who's the best 10 in Six Nations? Like, Untermach's not played enough. Finn Russell's been broadly quite off form. There hasn't really been a Welsh fly half.
Yeah.
You know, like, Tom Jordan's not played enough at 10. Paolo Garbisi's been extremely up and down.
There's a lot of errors. And
Yeah. And Jack Crowley's not played enough as well. Finn Smith's been very good.
Yeah.
I think it's between those guys, you know, of two quite up-and-coming fly halves, to speak. I think Prendergast has kind of had the edge with regards to all of that.
Agreed completely.
It helps that obviously he's played in a slightly better team, I guess, with a slightly more established attack kind of running around him so he can play kind of as a cog. But obviously none of this really matters, you know. It's all hypothetical. People in the comments will disagree. That's completely fine. It's just an opinion, you know. But yeah, Prendergast has been very, very good. And that has obviously been the talking point is like, oh, they've finally dropped him. Not the case at all. Like, whether you like it or not, Sam Prendergast is going to be a part of this Irish team for a long, long time to come. And that's a good thing because he's a great player. He's a young player. He will get better. He has got, as we've stressed many times before, Andy Farrell will come back in and help him with his defence. Jacques Nienaber at Leinster will help him with his defence. Like, it's not great at the moment. We are at the moment judging him on the second half against France, and the second half against France, he was, and I say this is a huge fan of Sam Prendergast, not brilliant, right?
He was all right. He was fine.
That is 1 half out of 8 that he has played in the Six Nations so far. In the other 7 halves of rugby he's played, he's been outstanding.
He's been really good
across the board.
Yeah.
You know, and you
You've
can't
also blown that England game up to be something it wasn't.
Yeah.
Which is Crowley comes on and barely touches the ball. Dan Sheehan is the one that makes the biggest impact in that game.
You
Crowley,
can't judge it on that. It's all recency bias, you know, and it's judged on the results.
People build, right, on full time. I had the same thought at full time, right, is you come away from that and go, oh, Crowley made a difference. Then you watch it back and actually he does. I'm not taking anything away from him. But you're like, he didn't do anything that Prendergast wasn't doing and wouldn't have done the rest of that game.
And, you know, the France game was a very interesting one. And we talked about this a little bit in the video done on that. But, like, Ireland were in a very rare position where they're chasing the game.
Yeah.
And they've not, you know, you've rarely seen someone dismantle Ireland like that before. Sam Prendergast has barely lost a game playing for Leinster before. Yeah. You know, he's not very often been in this position. Granted, there is a whole different argument there about, do you need a 10 who's been through a bit of hardship at international level? You know, there's obviously 2 sides to this because obviously you want someone who's used to winning, but obviously with experience comes knowing how to chase a game like that. And yeah, Prendergast forced stuff. There was the Ramos intercept, kind of the most crucial one, the one where he just that loop around and drops the ball. There's a lot of stuff like that. That doesn't equate to him necessarily being dropped. Not that this matters, because what matters is Jack Crowley is coming in and how he will play. As you come on to, we'll do Italy in a moment, right? But the rest of the Irish backline that we're looking at here, because Jack Crowley, Robbie Henshaw and Gary Ringrose as a midfield partnership is very, very well established, right? That, as you say, like, what I love about Jack Crowley as a player is he is equally good at the game management and the system attacking thing, you know? And again, like, you can say similar things of Prendergast, you know, but he will get the best out of those 2 centres.
He is a much more individual player, right? In that he will, if something is on for him, he will look up and kind of go for that first, right? In a way that Prendergast feels exclusively set around getting the most out of players around him. Yeah. Which is a really interesting young player to come through, because often normally those players develop over a long career.
It's the other way round normally, isn't it?
You look at like George Ford as someone who is that player, right? He was a guy who went for gaps himself as a kid and then developed into a guy who now just puts other people into space. Yeah. Normally that's the way it happens. And yet Prendergast has come through fully formed as this weird, well, not fully formed, obviously there's gaps in his game, but like he's come through as this guy like kind of ahead of his time in that
Super
regard.
Confident, yeah.
Where actually Crowley being a bit more individualistic in this Italy defence, which we talked about in the video on England v Italy, Italy's defence is so set on single tackles, right? They're not looking at double tackles, they're not really looking to slow down the breakdown, they want to keep as many people on their feet as possible, right? So it helps to have a 10 who is actively looking to engage you rather than necessarily thinking, you know, how do we get the ball into the place with the space easiest to go like, no, I want to pick off this defender, right? I think it's more like that. If you just break it down into the most simple level, these 2 10s, right? From a purely like, what are their strengths and weaknesses? How do they attack a game? Sam Prendergast is thinking about getting the ball into space. Jack Crowley is thinking about getting the ball past defenders.
Yeah.
Right?
Making a space.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, both are equally valid approaches to playing the game, and I think Ireland have been generally, with their new kicking focus, looking at getting the ball into space rather than beating defenders, which has been their focus over the last few years, really,
Yeah.
under Andy Farrell. So what we're looking at with Crowley here is a 10 who will come in and look to engage that first guy himself, right? As they play out a pod, they'll look to probably engage 2 players with the forwards, and then that third guy out, Crowley want to hold the ball a second longer than Prendergast would and just give it so that someone's engaging on him, right? You want to draw these players in. And when these defences so built around flooding the field with numbers, that becomes a really different prospect, as we saw against England with Finn Smith doing this himself and Marcus Smith then coming in as the first receiver as well and doing the same thing.
Yeah.
It becomes a much more threatening prospect than someone just getting the ball into space, which would work better against defence like Wales or Scotland, who are focused around slowing your ball down and making double tackles and really, cramping you.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, I think the thing is, Italy will really, really bring it in that first half. And you do need somebody who's going to frustrate them, you know? I think Jack Crowley, and this is a very typical Munster thing, but sometimes as a fly half, when you play for a team like Munster, who are often built on frustrating oppositions and then capitalising on every moment that comes their way, right? Yeah. You need a bit of a dickhead factor to yourself playing as a halfback in that team, You look at I think this is built on the foundations set by your Stringers, your O'Garas and so on, right?
Your so on.
Yeah, exactly, but particularly in the halfbacks. But Jack Crowley, I think, has a really good just emotional feel for how a game of rugby works, and knowing when to starve Italy of possession, when to starve them of territory. It is that balance rather than necessarily what can we do. It is what can we prevent the opposition from doing. Because we know what Italy are like as an attacking threat, And I think a lot of that comes on Jack Crowley of what cards to play on when to essentially piss Italy off.
Yeah.
Because as a fly half, you need a bit of that. And he's been around the block a little bit more than Prendergast has when it comes to something like that.
Yeah.
And obviously Gibson Park is, again, another player with a huge... I think played his hands brilliantly against Wales with that, of knowing, particularly in the second half when Wales were firmly in the game, knowing when do we just keep hold of the ball, when do we just set up camp in their half and just try and get them to force something, to overplay something. Because, again, we spoke about Prendergast overplaying earlier. If there is one hole in Paolo Garbisi's game, it's when he gets frustrated, you can see it.
Yes.
It is visible when he gets frustrated.
He's just incredibly animated, right? You can tell what he's thinking at any given point because he's doing it with his hands and he's gesturing and he is animated.
He's very passionate in the way he expresses an attack and everything.
He's very Italian, you might say. So that is the thing, right? That if Garbisi is starting to lose his head, you get all the signs, they all come up and he will start to scream at his teammates, he'll start to show it, and then he will probably start to make mistakes beyond that.
Yeah. Regardless of who you think is a better player between Jack Crowley and Paolo Garbisi, Crowley is more the master poker player. He has the better hand here, And you look at the pack that he's playing behind as well. I think the big change, there's a couple of big changes that have come in here. Obviously, they've got Tyg Furlong's come onto the bench who will come on for Finlay Bealham at some point in the game. I think that's really great to see. Obviously, every rugby fan pretty much is a big fan of Tyg Furlong. We're all very delighted to see that. Finlay Bealham quietly has been one of the better props in this tournament. I think he's been absolutely outstanding. I think really deserves to get this one last game. I think against that kind of the pressure of Fischetti on that loose outside of the scrum.
Really up and down at the scrum.
Yeah.
He clearly, and I'm not an expert, I can't talk too much on it, but I think he clearly responds well to certain styles of scrummager that he can really get on top of. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
It'll be really interesting as well when both replacements come on and you've got Furlong potentially against Spaniolo. I think that'll be a really great battle. But
Spaniolo made a difference in that game last year. He really, really came on and made an impact at the scrum.
But the main change I think here is in comes Jack Conan as a number 6. So usually he plays as a number 8. It's quite rare that he plays at number 6. We looked at this earlier. I think he's played two games for Leinster there.
Leinster this season at 6 with Caelan Doris both games at 8.
Yeah.
So this is the way around. This back row when they play together has played at Leinster.
I think typically in past you'd have put those two the other way around, but because this is obviously Peter O'Mahony's last game for Ireland, that they are looking to the future a little bit and going, who's going to be the next 6? And I think rightfully, Doris's best position is 8. They want to leave him there and go, Conan, even though you are more in 8 than Doris potentially is, that is the way around that back row probably should play for continuity's sake, that you can more easily rotate out Jack Conan and the captain in Doris, and that they've got other, they've had like Kian Prendergast, like Cormac Isachukwu is a great option there. That there's plenty of players that they might want to bring in there in future. But Jack Conan has been outstanding in this tournament, largely off the bench. Has weirdly scored 3 games running.
Yeah.
Out of nowhere.
Who noticed that one?
Yeah.
That was a surprise when we looked at that.
He's an unbelievable ball carrier. And on offensive breakdown ball, he will blast anyone out of there, which I think is really important as we look over to Italy.
Well, no, I want to quickly pick up on 2 other changes in the
Go on then.
Irish team.
Just put a pin on that. Put a pin in that.
When you were like, oh, the big change in the team, I was like, right, here we go. We're going to get onto it. And then you picked a different one. One is James Lowe coming back in, who is been arguably like player of the tournament contention. I think BLDRA is probably the runaway player of the tournament at the minute, but like James Lowe's right up there with Tom Curry as well, I think, and Jack Morgan as the best players in this year's championship.
And Brex, but yeah,
and Brex, of course, mostly Brex. But the really interesting change for me is Gary Ringrose comes right at 13.
Of course,
obviously missed a game with a ban.
Who's missed a game? Sorry,
isn't playing on the wing despite Leinster being released to play for Leinster, so he could get some game time on the wing, which is a huge surprise. Not sure what that one's about. But he comes right back in. And I think that's interesting because, again, Ireland's task in this game is to win by like 60, 70 points here, right? That's what they need to be doing, is really targeting every single point and hoping that France slip up. I would have thought that Bundy Aki would be the guy for that. So clearly what they've gone for is this team, I guess, looking to open up in the last 20 minutes. Looking perhaps contain Italy a bit more, try and play some more system-led rugby. As I said, Crowley helps with that, and try and get someone that runs good dummy lines and gets involved and, will take chances if they come to him, but isn't necessarily the destructive presence that Bundy Aki is. Yeah. And then Aki can come off the bench and in the last 20 minutes when he's fresh, perhaps make a difference and try and pull the game away a bit.
I'm actually going to very mildly disagree with you there.
Yeah.
Because Gary Ringrose is one of the centres in world rugby who is outstanding at reading a play, you know. And Italy, off every single set phase, will play something, will come up with a move, and obviously this is as much about keeping Italy's score down as it is scoring points themselves.
That's it, though.
I think for Ringrose is the man for that. And if you look at that bench, you've got Prendergast and Archie.
Yeah.
It'd be great if they had Craig Casey's come off the bench as well to really up the tempo. Yeah. Like that is a huge
Conor
loss.
Murray isn't up in the tempo, is he, when he
But
comes
that's it. Like I love Conor Murray, but that's not what he's there for.
Yeah.
Sorry, you were saying?
No, but that's exactly it. Like Ringrose is a defensive selection. He's primarily there as a conservative choice. Which I think is really interesting. They're not going absolutely for broke, despite that being what Crowley suggests.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. I'm not quite sure. It leads to some confusion as to how Ireland are going to play this, how they're going into it. Obviously, they're going to play the same way they always do. We know that. But how are they approaching this from a mental point of view in terms of what emphasis they put in different parts of the game?
I would imagine that Prendergast and Archie axis will come on quite early, and they might move Crowley to the back just so they can play as expansively as they need to. Yeah. Because obviously you've got Lowe and Hansen in there. Like Ringrose, we mentioned as well, is such a good first receiver as well that he pops up in there all the time, like really organises plays, and just will keep Italy guessing, play them at their own game a tiny bit.
However, speaking of keeping Italy guessing, Gonzalo Quesada has done just that, and he has dropped the captain in Michele Lamaro.
So that pin that I put up there earlier, let's go into that. So last week I kind of made a mistake on here saying that Nicotera and Menocella were like the only jackal threats in there. I completely forgot to mention Lorenzo Canone, who is also really good at the breakdown. Also, like statistically, Ross Vincent's like very good at the breakdown as well. But yeah, the main one we both mentioned in that Manuel Zuliani is outstanding both sides of the ball, specifically at the ruck. Yeah. Like, don't get me wrong, his carrying and his tackling are both unreal, but the ruck is where like that is his bread and butter, right? And I adore Michele Lamaro as a captain, as a character, as a rugby player, right? I think this is the correct decision.
I think so.
In terms of going for broke and going, we have to roll the dice a little bit to win this game, Manuel Zuliani is the man to put in. Yeah. He will disrupt Ireland's breakdown more, but more than that, he will slow down their ball more. Because Ireland, if they're to score 70 points, they need lightning fast ball. They need Gibson Park to have his hands in there as it is being presented so he can fire it away at 100 miles an hour. Yeah. If you've got Manuel Zuliani holding up tacklers, blasting through the breakdown, just being a prick on the floor and just really making that ball press difficult, it's going to be so much harder for the whole Irish attack to structure around that.
Look at Ireland over the Six Nations, right? Against England, first 50-odd minutes, England through Tom Curry in particular, but also that whole back row of Ben Curry as well, doing a brilliant job. And then, it'll be on that. slowed their ball down enormously. Ireland had nothing to play off. The only tries they scored came through James Lowe doing bits of bullshit until that pack tired and they didn't have the person on the bench to replace them like for like and do the same tasks, right? And Chandler Cunningham himself, great player, not the same player remotely, right? Wales were able to do that through their kind of double tackle technique incredibly well. Scotland couldn't, despite having a similar defensive strategy. And so, Wales denied them quick ball. It looked like, until that France game, like the only time they, slipped up and failed to score a bonus point try, Ireland were kicking the points because they weren't getting any quick ball in attack, right? And then France come in second half, they absolutely smashed them at the ruck, and they are slowing that ball down through physicality rather than jackling or rather than through, the tackle we're talking about with Wales. So we've had 3 different approaches to slowing their ball down this tournament, and they've each done a good job. Scotland couldn't do that at all, and we saw how lethal Ireland can be when you can't slow their ball down. Italy have gone, we need to target the breakdown. So they've just gone for the team with the best breakdown operators out there, right? So again, Nicolo Canone has been playing really, really well this Six Nations, but he is less of a kind of ruck fiend than Dino Lamb. So Lamb starts over him. Despite Lamb being the player in this year's Six Nations who's gone the most minutes without touching the ball, which is a great stat for you.
Has he still not had it yet?
He's yet to touch the ball.
What a guy. That's what a second row should be. Not even a line out.
I guess line-out takes, line-out takes aside. I didn't check that, He hasn't had the ball in open field.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's taken line-out.
Nobody's passed the ball to him, and he hasn't picked it up himself off the floor.
He hasn't made a carry or a pass
That's
so far,
heroic.
or a kick.
Yeah. That's the way it should be.
So,
he's there to hit things, and that is his job.
That's another moment to watch out for this weekend, right? The moment Dino Lamb gets the ball, no matter where you are, cheer.
If you put him in your fantasy team, I salute you.
But this is a great, look, if you're watching in a pub and 2 people cheer when Dino Lamb gets the ball for the first time, you know you've got a friend there.
Yeah, go shake hands with him.
Yeah, go shake hands with them and say, Rugby values.
Yeah,
Beaumont salutes you.
Yeah.
So that's a note for Italy.
Yeah.
Basically they've gone all out of the breakdown, haven't they? They've gone out to try and disrupt the breakdown. Their backline is largely as was. They've gone back to the team they had before. Ange Capowitz, I thought, was fantastic at fullback and had his best game of the Championship against England. So it is interesting they've reverted back to Tomato Allen.
Yeah, I think once again it implies to me that they want a bit of a cagey game that they open up later on. It's interesting that both teams have kind of butted heads with those kind of tactics. You look at the bench that Italy have gone for. They've gone for Stephen Varney, who I think will up the tempo, is much more of an attacking player than a kicking or defensive player. You've got Ross Vincent is... I hate to overuse this term for him, but game breaker. Yeah. He is just that kind of player. Obviously, Leonardo Maran just covers anywhere in the back line, will be another ball player, another distributor. And again, Lamaro, when he comes on, he will be pissed off. Yeah. He will not be happy that he's on the bench. He will not, as the captain, that is not something you just accept,
Yeah. This is going to be a fascinating game for Italy to work out where they're at.
I'm really excited for it.
Yeah. Ireland are going into this wanting to absolutely smash them. If they're going into this pissed off about that, that is their motivation done for the week. That is their team talk done. Is we don't let them do what France did to us.
And as I said the other week, they've won one game that they were expected to win in the Six Nations, right? In order for this to be anything but a subpar Six Nations from an Italian perspective, they have to win this game.
Yeah.
If they win this game, people will look at this and go, Italy have been brilliant on Six Nations because of recency bias, as I say earlier.
It's entirely possible, because Wales have got a losing bonus point and 2 tries bonus points, that Italy managed to, despite winning a game, still finish last in the Six Nations.
Yeah.
Without, even if Wales just pick up 2 bonus points against France. So they need something out of this. Right? So that's the other angle, is potentially, is that bench looking to try and get a try bonus point late on?
Yeah.
Looking to turn that around if Ireland do pull ahead. So you look at Varney, you look at Vincent, you look at Marine, you look at even, Nicotera and Spaniolo are great carrying options.
Such a destructive bench, isn't it?
Yeah. So that could be interesting to see how that goes. I think it's a game that's going to remain interesting for 80 minutes.
Yeah.
Even if Ireland get away, because it's the last day and because there's so much on it, that adds so much drama to this fixture that otherwise, if played maybe round 2 or 3, could have faded away from us.
Yeah. Obviously, big talking point that I want to close on.
Yeah.
There's a couple of them. So Peter O'Mahony and Conor Murray, both of them playing their final game for Ireland this weekend. Both players that we grew up watching. Conor Murray in his peak form was one of my favourite scrum halves to watch growing up, a real hero. Peter O'Mahony, Irish captain, Lions captain, has been on multiple tours. Incredible player, the king of shithousing in rugby.
Was Munster for about a decade.
Yep. called Sam Kane a shit Richie McCaw. Like, there is so much like heroic stuff that I want to talk about Peter Imani forever, and maybe we'll dedicate something to them later on. Who even knows? But I'm obsessed with the pair of them, and I just think there is no more fitting way for the pair of them to go out than against Captain Brex.
Yep, Captain Brex. That's the other key talking point, right? Brex as captain. This is the best day in Six Nations
We've been
history.
calling for it all Six Nations.
We've been calling it since before the Six Nations existed.
By the end of the year.
A random, incredibly slow Argentine man who is class.
He's
and
unreal.
captains Italy.
Look, if we just carry on these weekly videos, we can manifest by the end of the year he will be in charge of the World Rugby Council.
We can keep moving him up.
Yeah, let's
move him
keep
up 1
going.
week at a time.
He'll be head coach by the summer. And then he'll be in charge of the whole fucking world by the end of the year.